drug abuse, cancer,
measles, diabetes, AIDS, cancer.
Good evening once again, folks, and welcome to Doctor on Call. It is a pleasure again to bring you our program, and of course we say good evening as well to our viewers of GBN Television Channel 711, viewers on our GBN Facebook page and YouTube channel, and also of course all our listeners of K105 FM. So, folks, as I told you earlier this evening, we're looking at an area that we probably have not looked at before. We're looking at mental disorders, and it is a very extensive area, and many of you might be surprised at maybe how many of us around that may, in some way or the other, possess a mental disorder. I have a very special guest with me this evening, and I'm especially excited because he has very strong Grenadian connection. Now, he's not Grenadian per se, but very, very strong Grenadian connection. I have to sort of restrain myself because there's so much I can say, but time doesn't permit. So I want to welcome with us this evening Dr. Olusola, and he is a psychiatrist. He practices at Tri-City Mental Health Services in Pomona, California. Dr. Olusola, good evening and welcome to Doctor and Call.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm privileged to be here, and I'm very happy to be talking to your audience.
Yes, indeed. Now, folks, I am trying to restrain myself, but Dr. Olusola, he is married to a Grenadian, someone I know very well, someone actually that, we practically grew up together. So I'm especially elated to have him on the program. Dr. Wally, before we get into our discussion this evening, just tell us a little bit about who you are. Briefly. I mean, I know it's extensive, but just very, very brief. Yes.
Well, I was born in Nigeria. At the age of 9, I went to live in England with my parents, and I stayed in England till I was probably about 17, 18. Finished medical school in Nigeria. Took a job at Trinidad, at Port of Spain General Hospital in Trinidad and Tobago. And I practiced there for about 15 months. I then came to the United States, was accepted to Penn State University, where I did 1 year of pediatric specialty. And then from there, I went to Albert Einstein in Philadelphia. And I did my 4 years of completed my 4 years of psychiatry, and then from there I went on and I went to practice in Kentucky. I was invited by the mayor of Owensboro, Kentucky, to come there and help them develop their psychiatric program. So I was there and working with the hospital there, and at the same time I opened my private practice, which my wife was really a great help because she's a nurse, and so together she was the nurse that really ran the office. So she was my backbone, so great. It's good to have a great wife, And so we kept that office open for about, I think, 15 years or more. And once our children grew up and went on to college, I took it. Well, during that time when I was in Kentucky, I was also the director of Brentwood Meadows, where I was taking care of people who had drug problem and mental health problem. And at the same time, I was the director for St. Mary's Hospital Geriatric Service in Indiana. And I also was a consultant for nursing homes. So I was doing a lot of drug and alcohol. I was doing Alzheimer's. I was taking care of children. I was taking care of every aspect of psychiatry. Then I left there. I went to Maryland. I was invited by the state of Maryland to come and help them with their forensic cases. So I was in Maryland for about 8 years. I practiced forensic psychiatry, taking care of the criminally insane. And so, but over the years, one of my areas of interest is nutrition also. So that's my background, basically. That's my background.
Wonderful, wonderful. We can go into talk about that all night, but we have other matters. Mental disorder. It is an area I think that is very, very important. There are a lot of people, in the world, over 20 million people who do have mental disorders, and they do need care. But before we get into some of it, let us put into perspective. When we speak of mental disorder, can you briefly explain to us what is a mental disorder?
Well, it's a wide range of conditions that affects the person's mood, their thinking, and their behavior to different degrees. Some may be, some may manifest more behavioral dysfunction. Some may show more of mood. Some may show more of the thinking process. If they have more of a thinking disorder, difficulty, that's what you really call psychosis, and then when you're talking about mood, you're talking about how a person feels. Maybe depression, maybe anxiety, and then sometimes when we talk about behavior, that could be aggression, laughing inappropriately, giggling inappropriately, not wanting to speak, just staying quiet or just standing stiff. So the field of psychiatry is a very complex, very, very complex. It is, psychiatry is a 4-year training. To be a pediatrician is 3 years. And so psychiatry is so complicated. And when you're a psychiatrist, you not only have to understand the function of the mind, but you also have to understand the body. Because there are diseases that affect the body that will manifest as psychiatric issues. And so sometimes I get people in my office that are sent to me by their primary physician because they don't know what's going on. They say, okay, let's send you to the psychiatrist. And sometimes they've actually missed it. They focus on the mental health, but it's actually a physical problem.
So, am I to understand here that mental disorders can manifest themselves in different ways? They present themselves differently.
Right.
Yeah. Now, we know that there are many different types of mental disorders. Let's talk a bit about some of the common ones. We know of depression. This one comes to mind immediately. We also know about bipolar disorder, dementia, and others, which includes things like autism and so on. But let's start with depression.
Okay, so depression is probably the most common mental health. But, just feeling down doesn't make you depressed.
Okay.
Depression is different in the sense that it is a persistent feeling of sadness for weeks and sometimes months. By the time a patient comes to see us, the patient complains of low energy. They complain of loss of appetite, fatigue. They can't sleep, or sometimes they sleep in too much. They have no interest in doing anything. They cannot focus. And these are people that, I like to say, they see the world they see their cup as half empty. They dwell on something that happened in the past. They're focused on the past. And sometimes they feel guilty. Something happened in the past that they can't get away from. Contrary to, as opposed to a person who's anxious. People who are anxious they're worried about what's going to happen in the future. What's going to happen? Is this going to happen? Is this going to happen? The person who's depressed is thinking about what happened in the past. So that's basically it.
Right. aside from thinking of something happened in the past, what qualifies it as a mental disorder? Because yes, you may dwell on something in the past that probably gets you down, and you don't, it's something that you cannot probably, put aside. But what qualifies that as a mental disorder?
It's the daily, persistent. You're talking about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. By the time it's 6 weeks, you're either loss of appetite, you're losing weight, you don't want to bother. Sometimes you don't want to go to work, and it's serious because people start feeling helpless, hopeless, and sometimes suicidal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay? So, we all have situations where we just get down and, somebody comes to visit us and we're feeling, we smile, or, we can still function. Depression really does not allow you to function because you can't focus. You can't keep up with your job if you're working because the energy to focus is not there.
Mm-hmm.
And the individual will know. The problem we often have is people see it as a sign of weakness, and they're afraid to say, I'm depressed. If we can get more people, a lot of people, it makes me very sad when I learn about somebody committed suicide. Most often it's because they never got the help. And a lot of time, especially men, women are quick to say, hey, something's wrong. Men very often will turn to other things. They may drink more thinking that would help. They may turn to drugs to think that would help. But that's just a temporary fix. Eventually that actually complicates the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, depression is not just your regular sadness. It's persistent, and it tends to get worse over several days. Now, depression can also be a part of a bipolar. So, we have to be careful. So a person who says they're depressed, depression may be the first presentation of a bipolar disorder. And so if the psychiatrist or if a family doctor is treating that client and treats them just for the depression and without the anticipation that the antidepressant can push that person into a manic stage, then that could be a bigger problem. In fact, I've had situations where, I give an example. I was at a conference. I was at a psychiatric conference in Florida, and I received a phone call. And the phone call was a colleague who is a family doctor. And he says, Wally, he said, please, I need your help. I said, what's the problem? He said, I've got a client who is trying to kill himself. And I said, what? I said, how long have you been treating this patient? He said, I've been treating this patient for the last 2 years. I said, why did you not just refer that patient to a psychiatrist so that you can, you're good with the blood pressure and stuff. And I said, okay, put the patient in the hospital. But the patient did not want to go in the hospital. The patient's mind was far gone. He was now developing psychosis. Sometimes the person gets so depressed, they become psychotic. They're hearing voices. They're hearing voices that are controlling them and telling them to kill themselves and do things, command auditory hallucinations. So I said, look, whatever you do, put this person in the hospital. I'm about to get on a plane. I was in Miami airport. I got on the plane. As soon as I landed, I got a call that the man had, it was gone. The man was gone. And I say that because very often I discovered later on when I did the further investigation on that case, the man was actually bipolar. The treatment that he was giving the patient pushed the patient into mania. And the patients are more likely to actually commit suicide when they become manic.
Mm-hmm.
And so later on, his brother started to show had the same presentation. So the brother was sent to me and I took care of the brother. The brother's fine.
Okay, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah. So let me ask, it leads me to this question. Depression, does it have any genetic bearing?
Oh, definitely. Bipolar disorder is the most genetically determined psychiatric disorder. There are some genetic components to just about all your mental health issues. We often see people who have, we often see depression running families. In fact, I can tell you what, a lot of my clients, when I was in private practice, in fact, even in my current practice, I'm taking care of grandmother, mother, and granddaughter. I'm taking care of 3 generations because they have that genetics for depression. Okay? So what's great about that is very often if we have treated the grandmother or mother successfully, then we kind of have an idea of what medication that works. A lot of times medication that work for the older generation will work for the same younger generation in that family. And now I have to say this, some of it also is not necessarily genetic. Is sometimes there are things. If we raise children to stress, if you're constantly knocking somebody down, if you're constantly telling them they never amount to anything, if you constantly put somebody down, children especially, they need to be encouraged. They need to be they need to believe in themselves. Okay, for an adult to say to a child, "You're useless. You're no good. You never amount to anything." Well, children are like an empty glass. If you take an empty glass and you put water in it, okay, and you seal it, 20 years later, if you open it, you still get water in there. Right. So if I have a child, if I put nothing but negativity in that child, you're no good. Look at you. You're short. You're ugly. What am I putting into that child? I'm putting negativity. So that child eventually is likely to develop depression. So that's a situation. So you can actually create that in what you say. So mothers and fathers need to be very careful, and they should not speak out of place to correct their kids. Don't tell your child that child is ugly. Don't tell your child that your child cannot do this, your child cannot do that. Encourage them to do their best. And I think a lot of times parents make mistakes. They make a lot of mistakes. And now there's also, here in the United States, there's a lot of women that are depressed because they have been abused from childhood by neighbors, members of their household, babysitters, and those kids were trapped in an adult world where they had no means of escape, where they could not defend themselves, and the perpetrator has abused them for years. And so those people, it is, I can't tell you how many times somebody will come to my office and tell me their story, and I just start crying. Because you can't, let me tell you, Godfrey, you can't believe the ungodly things that people do to children. It is, I've had people arrested right in my office because the perpetrator brings the child with the hope of somewhat intimidating the child. Mm-hmm. So that the child won't speak. They're afraid the child is going to see the doctor, so that's why they want to come in. So sometimes I have to say, step out of my office. I need to talk to this teenage girl by herself, because I get the vibes. I see the signs. I see the timidness. I see, they don't want to talk. They're shaking. And I say, please, can you step out? And if they start giving me a hard time, we have a problem. But a lot of time, I'll find out. I have to dig it out of them, or I may have one of my nurses take them in a room and talk to them. What happens is, there's so much abuse. There is so much abuse. I don't know how many people, but it's got to be, I would say in my current practice, I would say 85% of my female clients have been abused. Now we see more with boys too. Mm-hmm. So, and those young boys who were abused as kids, and it doesn't have to be sexual abuse. It's just pulling the belt and just beating the child for every little thing and screaming constantly. And the constant put down it's like I said, what you're putting inside of that child is so much negativity that's all the child has to get.
Okay, Doc, a quick question here. A child in that situation, having to grow up under those conditions, later on becomes depressed. Can that action, now, although that child, let's say, did not inherit a depressive gene from a family member, but because of abuse and other forms of neglect and all of that, becomes depressed, can that child pass on, or can that sort of behavior affect that individual's genetics and so passed on to that person's children later on?
No.
Okay.
No. However, it's very, very important that individual undergo years of psychotherapy. Psychotherapy to help them undo all of that trauma and make it you'll be amazed how many of them think that it was their fault. They really believe it's their fault. That maybe if I'd been a better son, maybe if I was a better daughter, my father would not have abused me. The neighbor would not have done that. Maybe if I didn't dress so well, maybe if I didn't have a long hair, the man wouldn't. So we have to reprogram them. And it doesn't take a day. Sometimes it takes as much as 7 to 10 years. Okay? And we have to add medication to help them. And eventually, also depending on their genetic constitution, some people can make a faster recovery than others. So you're talking about the severity of the abuse will determine that person's psychological strength, inherent psychological strength will determine. You know, I always say to people, 2 soldiers goes to Iraq. One comes back, he's depressed, he has post-traumatic stress disorder. The other one says, well, I'm back. He doesn't suffer because they have genetic, there are some where just as we vary in our physical strength, we also vary in our psychological strength and how we can rebound from being oppressed and psychologically oppressed.
Right. Now, Doc, just before we go to a commercial break quickly, someone living with depression, how do you deal with someone like that in terms of caring for the patient? And I'm not speaking now about, psychiatric care. I'm talking about someone at home who is depressed. You have family members. And in a case like that, you have to be careful that people who are in the same environment as a depressed person do not do anything to further complicate that situation.
Right.
How should people deal with someone that is depressed?
Well, the first thing is, if you have nothing good to say, then don't say anything.
Okay.
Don't tell a person who's depressed, just get over it. Don't call that person you're lazy. You're just lazy. Get off your rear end and do something. Listen. If you would listen, you might learn something. Even though that person lives in the same house as you, you may actually find out if you allow the person to speak without judging them, without making them afraid to express their thinking. You might learn that that person was raped by a neighbor or was raped on the way from school. When a person who's depressed is able to express, it's like a pressure cooker. Finally, somebody's listening to me. It helps. That is the beginning of a recovery. But when they think that people who are close to them don't care enough to hear about what's in their mind, that just makes it worse. If a pressure cooker, if you want a pressure cooker to settle down, you know what you do? You take off the lid, let some of the vapor, you let some of the pressure out. So you don't want a person who's depressed to feel isolated. You want to hug that person. The mother needs to say to the daughter, if it's the son, the father or the mother needs to approach and say, son, what's going on? Is something wrong with you? How can I help you? You have to. You have to. Okay. So in most houses, girls are usually very close to their mothers, and so mothers would know. And hopefully the mother shares it with the husband. And they say, okay. But ultimately, it's good to get a professional person involved, because professional people are not a threat to that child. Okay? And that children or that individual, what is a child to the individual, they're more likely to express themselves freely to a professional person who they know is in their best interest. Okay. And sometimes we often tell the clients, whatever you tell us, unless you permit us, we won't tell your family. Now, we would only tell your family if you feel like you want to kill yourself. That we have to. We need to let the family know. Okay.
Okay. So, Doc, we take a commercial break. We come back with some more questions on depression, and then we'll move on to bipolar disorder. Stay with us, folks. We'll be back with you in just a moment.
Pharmacy offers both wholesale and retail pharmaceutical and over-the-counter products. We have the most competitive and affordable prices. We are the agents for Vit Plus multivitamin for healthy everyday lifestyle and Synatogen powder. Hills and Valley Pharmacy supplies the best quality, name brand clinical products such as Rescue Oil, Bio Oil, Neutrogena, Aveeno, and Clarisil. We offer the most convenient opening hours. Our telephone numbers are 435-6904 or 6903. Remember, at Hills and Valley Pharmacy, your health is our business. We care.
Now open, Hills and Valley Medicare Center, your one-stop for medical supplies, massage therapy, physiotherapy, and an in-house physician. At Hills and Valley, your health is our business.
A message by the Grenada Distillers Limited.
You want a hand sanitizer to do 3 things: kill germs, be gentle, and to go where you go. You can get all of that in our hand sanitizer. Hard on germs, gentle on hands, affordable. Remember, hand sanitizers contain alcohol. Keep away from heat and flames and avoid contact with eyes. Available at retailers island-wide.
A message by the Grenada Distillers Limited.
How going on, boy?
Hey, good old things.
Hey, Daisy.
Yeah.
Boy, in line, boy. Your house looking a real good day.
Boy, it's thanks to the hard-working and professional staff at the Housing Authority of Grenada. They handled me real nice. They did my plan, they did the construction, and I didn't even have to worry about a thing. They were there with me every step of the way, supervising the job, asking me about my concerns, giving me feedback as the house took shape. They were there from start to finish, and even put the keys in the palm of my hand. I give them an A++ for customer service.
Oh, it's people from housing bad, boy.
Boy, not bad. Excellent. If you're thinking about constructing your home, why not consult the Housing Authority of Grenada? You could visit them right down in the Sandino complex, or give them a call, 440-1015 or 440-1016. Or check out their website, hag473.com. They go handle you. They go jog your blocks, they go draw your plan, they go tote your materials. Hey man, where you going? The Housing Authority of Grenada is your choice for affordable housing and a stress-free construction experience.
Welcome on your blood heart so bad now. My God. A man tried to sell me. I went down here to do something. A man tried to deal me.
Not this thing, man.
Yeah, I wanted to deal me and tell you.
Property you come out in?
No, it's not that. I tell I had to go and do something. So, what? Somebody asked me to go and drop something for you. So when I go, I see the man, and I know the man tried to sell me. He want to take me soul.
He damn good.
Should I sell you?
He good. You know that man does deal?
No, man. Watch. I know the man does deal, but what I say is, where when they? I expect the man try to do that.
One day. My partner, you want to go and see your light burning.
No. The man try to deal me. She want to take me soul. But folks, let me tell you something. This Friday week culture, I will tell all you who tried to sell me and what they tried to sell me for. So make sure and join us Friday on the week culture. All you careful. You are real dealers in the place.
They should have sell you. I don't know why you're here though. You should have been sold for real.
Cool team.
A little more than more. A little more Shango.
Welcome back. It's Dr. On Call, and for those of you just joining us, our guest this evening is Dr. Wole Olusola. He's a psychiatrist, among many other things in the medical field. We're discussing mental disorders. Doc, just before the break, we were talking about caring for people who are depressed. Early up in the program, you did mention similarities with depression and bipolar disorder. Before we get to that, however, depression and ethnicity, is there any connection? Is there any particular race that are more likely to be depressed than others? Could you unmute your microphone is muted? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure there's an accurate statistics for that, because you have to recognize some ethnic group are more likely to seek help, while others are more likely to keep it in. Mm-hmm. In some ethnic group, it is not acceptable to even say that you have a mental illness. It's a sign of weakness. So, there are statistics out there, but I'm not sure they're really accurate. Okay. Because, a lot of time, somebody's coming to the office for the first time, and I'm saying this person's depressed. Then I start asking questions about family members. And then I find that 2 family members have committed suicide. And I'll say, did this person get any help? No, they did not recognize it. And the family would not accept that person to see a doctor for mental illness. It's okay to see the doctor for headache, heart problem, blood pressure, but mental illness, it's an embarrassment to the family. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of mental health is still something people are ashamed of, to come out and say, I have a mental health issue. And this is part of the reason why the suicide rates tend to be high.
But I mean, with that kind of situation existing, people being ashamed to come forward and say, look, we do have a mental health issue in the family. There is someone who has a problem. That in itself becomes a problem, because there's no help for the individual, and if someone else in the family ends up in a similar situation, then it further complicates. I mean, as a psychiatrist, how do you advise people against that? How do you counsel them in a case like that?
Well, we do a lot of public education. Mm-hmm. We do a lot of public education. For example, I go to various churches, and I speak, trying to educate people on mental health issues. And I know a lot of my colleagues do that too. And sometimes radio, there are different things, and there are pamphlets that are passed out. So we try to educate the community. But I would say this, having been in the medical practice for 37 years, I can tell you that things are much, much better today than they were 37 years ago. Mm-hmm. People are more willing, but there's still a lot that's brushed under the carpet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So let's move. You earlier you mentioned similarities with depression and bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder, what is it, and how does it present itself?
Okay, bipolar disorder is often associated with episodes of mood swings ranging mainly from depressive low and manic highs. So let's break that down.
Yes.
So they may, in each phase, whether the depression or the mania, very often will last weeks and months, not just days, weeks and months. So a person in the manic phase, they're high energy, they may be laughing, they tend to have risky behaviors. Like they may drive excessively high speed, they have no need for energy, they have no need for sleep, they stay up all night making phone calls, talking on the phone, they're just happy. they multitask, they're doing so many things. And it's obvious to other people, this person, this is not just regular being happy. This person is so happy and is so high energy. And at the same time, they could be irritable and just fussy. So there's that manic, elated mood where they're just feeling high. And some of them, they may have distortion of their thoughts. For example, in the manic state, they may be grandiose. They may tell you that they may claim to be Superman. They may claim that that they're the strongest man in the world, or they're Bruce Lee. No, they come in, so they're that mania, just completely so high, and the danger of the manic stage is when they're in that phase of the manic when they're in that phase of mania, they may have multiple sexual partners. I give you an example. Young man, extremely manic. He was just getting tickets every time. He lost his license because he was driving fast. This was before he came to see me. And of course, on his way home from work, he would go and sleep with various women. With total disregard to the fact that he's married and he could contract sexually transmitted disease. And I had another woman who was so manic. She was so manic. She went, and she's a beautiful woman, and women who are manic may become extremely flirtatious. So she sees this guy in the grocery store, and she's flirting with him, and he goes, "Me? You're flirting with me? I'm a lucky man. Look how beautiful you are." And she said, "Let's go to the courthouse and get married." And they went to the courthouse, and they got married the next day. Now, I knew her husband. Her husband is a police officer. He carries a gun. So eventually, he realized that something's wrong because she would not go to sleep. She was up all night fixing the house, cooking, disrupting, so he brought her to the hospital. So when she came to the hospital, the nurses recognized that she's my client. And she had stopped taking her medication, okay? Mm-hmm. And so when she came to my office, when I put her in the hospital, and this new husband came, I looked at him and I said, "You're not her husband. I know the husband. He has a gun. He is the chief of police. This man is the sheriff. He's the head of he's the sheriff for the city. And if this man found out you married his wife, he has a gun." The man was like, "He did not know." I said, "Well, that marriage is null and void." But yeah, so mania is really. It's an extreme elated behavior. Okay, so that can go on for weeks and months. Very often they get into trouble. They get into trouble with the law. They get into drugs. They like to smoke. That's when they're most like they get into all these drugs. They want to try this. They want to try that. And some may accidentally commit suicide because if you feel you're Superman and you're standing on a window ledge, you might think you can fly. Because you don't realize you're delusional, you're grandiose. So they can be extremely grandiose. Now, all of a sudden, after several weeks, they're depressed. They are so depressed they can barely move.
And that's the same person who's been all manicky all over the place.
That's right. That's right. So now this person is so depressed, no energy. Nobody likes me. I just wish I could just die. I wish I could go to sleep and not wake up. I don't want to eat. I don't want nothing. I don't want to do anything. I have no energy. So when you see, the extremes are so obvious. The extremes is like day and night. That is what bipolar is. And bipolar, they can be psychotic too, in the depressed phase and in the manic phase. Okay? So they can be manic. Now, I have to tell you this. Bipolar is the most genetically determined psychiatric disorder. Bipolar disorder is the most genetically determined psychiatric disorder. So if a person has it, the offsprings, there's a 50% chance that one of the offsprings will have it.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay? But the good thing is it's treatable. I mean, we manage it. We treat it. I mean, listen, I have lawyers, I have engineers, I have bankers. I treat them all. We treat them all. The key thing is they have to accept that they have the illness and be willing to take their medication. And for the most part, they can do fairly well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You mentioned that they can become psychotic. What do we mean by that?
Psychosis. When I say psychosis, it's an extreme thought disorder where the person is no longer rational. They lack insight and they lack judgment. For example, if you come to my office, psychosis is when you think your neighbor has his computer wired into your brain and can read your thinking process, can actually, or you think you can fly because you're Superman, or you think that you're the strongest man in the world, or you've got a special mission here because you were sent here from heaven to do this or that. It's extremes. There are things that you just know is extreme. It's not just one thing. And another form of psychosis is if you think you might think people are out to get you. Mm-hmm. People are conspiring against you. Nobody knows you exist. Why do you think your neighbors are? My client tells me. I'm talking to my client. My client said, "Shh, doc, don't speak so loud. That the government has put a chip in his brain and they're reading his thoughts. And so he can't talk to me. He has to write everything on the paper."
Because he doesn't want the government here.
He doesn't want the government to see. Because
what's on the chip? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They put a chip in his brain. Mm-hmm. So you see, these are extreme. These are psychosis, and of course, psychosis also include auditory hallucinations. Okay. Psychosis includes hearing voices. Sometimes people see things. Now, if somebody is seeing things, we start to suspect drugs. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, a person can appear manic because they're so high on cocaine, methamphetamine. Those medications can make you. They can make you present as if you're manic. Okay. So.
Right. So there is another one that I want us to speak about. We hear quite a lot of it. Dementia.
Okay.
What is dementia?
Dementia is the result of loss of brain cells. Dementia, in broad terms, can be classified into Alzheimer's and vascular dementia. Vascular dementia. Well, there's so many different reasons why a person can develop dementia. There are virus. It can be due to a virus. Okay, some virus can really, can slowly eat away at your brain, and you can develop dementia. So, but dementia generally manifests as loss of recent memory. So very often when a person who has dementia, when you're talking to the person with dementia and you say, "Hey, do you remember when we were in school? What was the name of our teacher in elementary school?" They may remember that. But if you say to them, "What did you have for breakfast?" they can't remember. So the problem of course, in very advanced stages of dementia, you may have loss of even, distant memories. Now, why is that? The reason is that the memories that are well established within the brain. So the things that I did when I was a youth, when I was young, have been recorded in so many brain cells. So if I lose a few, I can still remember. Mm-hmm. But when it comes, but the problem is, I lack the ability to record because the brain is now deteriorated. The brain cannot record recent activities. Oh. So somebody might say, "Well, how come my mother have dementia? She remembers everything. She still remembers things that happened 50 years ago." That doesn't mean she doesn't have dementia. Does your mother remember if you tell her to remember 5 things? Like say, remember apple, car, penny, table, house. In 5 minutes later, if you ask her, can she name one of those? If she can't name those 5 things, she probably is developing dementia. Okay, so we have various tests. But dementia, when we talk about dementia, the only way to know what really caused the loss of memory is at autopsy. So, but Alzheimer is the most common one, okay? And it usually it starts to present somewhere after the age of 65.
Okay.
It can present earlier, but it's usually after the age of 65. Now, vascular dementia is often preventable. What is vascular dementia? Vascular dementia occurs when the vasculature, the blood vessels in the brain are compromised. All right, so take a person, the people who are prone to vascular dementia, Alzheimer's, vascular dementia, loss of memory, are people who have what you call metabolic syndrome. For example, what do I mean by metabolic syndrome? Diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol. Those 3 things can wipe out your memory. How does it happen? All right. When a person has diabetes, excess sugar in the bloodstream very often will bind to fat and make those, so the fat becomes what you call glycated. Glycated fat sticks to the arteries. So as those glycated fat begin to deposit in the arteries of the brain, the blood supply to the brain becomes less and less because the lumen, the opening of those blood vessels, are gradually decreasing. And blood is the life of the brain. So over many years, so if people have diabetes, so now when you see someone who has diabetes who's complaining of chest pain, they probably have arterials, the deposit of fat in the arteries, we call it arteriosclerosis.
Arteriosclerosis, yes.
Arteriosclerosis, I'm sorry. So arteriosclerosis, I'm sorry. I'm messing up there. So people have diabetes. They have to control their blood sugar. The fact that you're feeling well, you're not hurting. There are physiological changes that are going on within your arteries. So those people, somebody has diabetes, and the man says, the man is having erectile dysfunction. Well, the erectile dysfunction is because that arteriosclerosis is going on throughout the body. It's going on not only in the genital area, but in the cardiac arteries and also in the cerebral arteries. So if you follow them, within 10 years, a lot of them would have a stroke. The erectile dysfunction or the heart problem is just telling you that something's going on. And so, why do you need to keep your sugar in within the normal range? That's the reason why. So a lot of time people say, "Oh, I can eat this. My sugar's," a lot of diabetics are very often, they tend to be reckless with the way they eat, because they don't understand that even though they're not hurting, there are serious
things happening
that are happening. Now, with a person who has hypertension, slightly different. When the end arteries, the extreme end of the arteries of the brain, they're fragile. Okay, they're fragile. So when your blood pressure is high, it's like blowing into a balloon. If you keep blowing into a balloon, what happens?
It's gonna bust. Yes.
It will bust. So if your blood pressure is out of control, you know what happens? Those arteries become extended, and their walls become thinner and thinner, and pop, you bleed. And so every time and the bleed doesn't have to be massive. You're having all these tiny bleeds all over your brain. All the cells within that area of that blood vessel are dying because they're losing blood supply. And eventually you have enough. Your brain cells, your brain just starts to shrink. So now cholesterol is the same thing. High cholesterol. If your cholesterol is high, even if you don't have diabetes, cholesterol tends to clog up the arteries and eventually cut off the blood supply to the brain, to the heart, and to the rest of the body. So dementia really is a loss of memory, and there's often change in personality. The person may they may be labile, they may be depressed, they may be anxious. But the key thing is you see the memory changes. They're forgetful. And so, but they may develop, there may be some comorbidity or some other complications such as anxiety, such as depression, such as aggression, okay? Depending on which lobe of the brain is primarily affected.
Okay, wonderful. So, Doc, schizophrenia, another very common one. And this is it's a big term, so let's break it down so people can understand what we mean when we speak of schizophrenia.
All right. Schizophrenia is probably one of the most, it's a very complex illness. It's basically extreme psychosis. It's chronic, persistent psychosis. These people have, the most prominent feature of schizophrenia is thought disorder. That means they lack insight and they have poor judgment. They don't even realize they can't even, their ability to extract reality from a conversation or from what's happening around is distorted. A person walks by, it's a schizophrenic would think, well, you know, it's the paranoid schizophrenia is the most common. So that's what we see most. Paranoid schizophrenia, you know, they think people have to get them. There's a conspiracy. They tend to isolate. They're afraid to be around people. You know, you don't really have to be afraid of a person schizophrenic. Schizophrenics are actually afraid of people. Very often people think, oh my gosh, this person has this disorder, so they become afraid. Schizophrenics are more often than not, are afraid of people. And they may have bizarre, depending on, you know, there are various types of schizophrenia. You may have catatonic schizophrenia. They may walk and move in funny ways. But a lot of them believe that their thoughts are being controlled by somebody, or they may feel like aliens. I give you a very strange example. Now, here in the United States, if a patient in the hospital complains that they were raped while in the hospital, we have to call the police. So I get to my, you know, I walk on my unit, and this new client that was admitted under my name says, Doc, the nurse, you know, I mean, the unit is so big, there's so many people. You can't do nothing without everybody else seeing you. And complains to me that the nurses raped him. He's delusional. He's having delusions of persecution that, you know, he thought they raped him. And of course, I'm thinking, oh boy, we have to call the police department. And we had to. And now, then he went on to say, well, he told the sheriff, he told the police, he said, well, the police said, well, you know, they're not, these people that raped me, said to the guy, said, who raped you? He said, well, they were aliens. They came from Mars. And I said, what else did they do to you? Was it they raped me in front of the nurse's station? The nurses didn't do anything about it. And then they took my liver, they took my kidney, and they took both my knees. And the officer is holding his head like, oh boy, do I have to write all that? And you have to write all that down. And it's protocol. So what I'm saying is, their mind is so far gone. They lack the ability to extract reality from what's going on. They're just totally isolated in a world of delusions. That people are doing things, or people want to do things to them. People are manipulating their body. People are reading their mind. They're watching television. They think that television is making reference directly to them. Okay? And a lot of them, almost all of them, hear voices. Schizophrenia, generally, they hear voices. And those voices are constantly, 24/7, talking to you. And that's enough to drive you crazy. Imagine 2 or 3 people on each side of your ears and constantly having a conversation, you can't do anything.
Right.
Because you're constantly distracted. And so the thing about it is they tend to decline. Schizophrenia, it's a downhill course. So, but the great thing is, I'm going to tell you, Godfrey, when I was in medical school about 38, 39 years ago, we didn't have a lot of choices. We only had 1 or 2 medications to treat schizophrenia. In this day and age, there are hundreds. The field of psychiatry has developed, has advanced, and instead of giving somebody pills, we can give them a 30-day injection. They get a shot once a month, and they're fine. Okay? They still cannot function at the same level as most people, but at least it alleviates some of their suffering. And that's the key. Our job is just to alleviate their suffering. We cannot cure it, but we can alleviate their suffering. And so that at least they can interact with other people to some extent, because they're usually very guarded, they're afraid of people, and they may look at you from a distance, because they're afraid, they're scared. The voices are telling them that man Godfrey over there, he's going to hurt you, So those voices are not real voices, they're just in your head. It's auditory hallucination. And like I said earlier on, now there are some situations where they may come in. I have a guy who's constantly telling me, well, I see these faces in the trees. Every time I'm walking down the street, there's all these faces hiding behind the trees and they're watching me. Well, it's part of his schizophrenia. Okay? Some schizophrenia, not all of them, some of them may have visual hallucinations. Okay?
But Doc, the auditory hallucinations, what causes that? Is it also damage to brain cells as well?
Okay, that's a good question. What we're finding out is a lot of mental health issues are the result of chemical imbalance within the brain. There are what you call neurotransmitters within the brain, and they help to convey information from one area to the other. And sometimes there's some sort of defect. Now, I would tell you this: a person can be, let me give you an example. A person who's a worry, it just worries all the time. Okay? Your brain works through electrical current. There are very, very tiny electrical current that carries information from one cell to the other very fast. Okay? It's like a big computer chip. Now, the more you worry, the more you think and worry, the more you stress yourself out, you're basically increasing the current flow through your brain. Now, what happens if somebody double the current going through your house? It blows the fuse, right?
Yes.
So by worrying excessively, you can actually fry your brain and throw yourself in depression. And that's why you'll find people who are chronically depressed, later in life, they may develop memory issues. Because what happens is that constant negativity and worries, and same thing with people who have a lot of anxiety. They worry so much that they increase the current in their brain, and the brain can only sustain that much current for so long, years, day after day, month after month, year after year. Eventually, it damages the brain. So, but schizophrenia is definitely, schizophrenia is associated with chemical imbalance, such as dopamine and different things. But there is a lot of good medications now on the market. This is a great time to be a psychiatrist because I have so many choices. I can always find something that works for a client.
Wonderful. Doc, let's take our final commercial break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about who are at risk, the people who are at risk for mental disorders, and briefly health and support, and we'll try and accommodate a couple of telephone calls. So stay with us, folks. We'll be back with you in just a moment.
Valley Pharmacy offers both wholesale and retail pharmaceutical and over-the-counter products. We have the most competitive and affordable prices. We are the agents for Vic Plus multivitamin for healthy everyday lifestyle and Sanatogen powder. Hills and Valley Pharmacy supplies the best quality, name brand clinical products such as Rescue Oil, Bio Oil, Neutrogena, Aveeno, and Clarisil. We offer the most convenient opening hours. Our telephone numbers are 435-6904 or 6903. Remember, at Hills and Valley Pharmacy, your health is our business. We care.
Now open Hills Valley Medicare Center, your one-stop for medical supplies, massage therapy, physiotherapy, and an in-house physician. At Hills Valley, your health is our business.
Back in 2018, I ran into some conflict with the law, which led me to being in a rehabilitation center. While I was there in the beginning, I thought all hope was lost. But then I found myself being engaged in a lot of rehabilitation programs and skill-based activities, making better use of my time, and then I started getting back some hope and began moving forward. Before I got into the rehabilitation center, I had some issues. I used to pray for something better in my life, and something better has come. Maybe not in the best way expected, but my life has changed for the better. In the rehabilitation center, I learned a lot of things that I use in my life today, like barbering and business skills. Today I am looking forward to being an independent barber, using my business skills while I continue to do skills training. We all deserve a chance for change.
Give our children a chance for change through diversion, rehabilitation, and reintegration. This message is brought to you by the USAID OECS Juvenile Justice Reform Project 2, funded by the United States Agency for International Development. For more information, log on to oecs.org/JJRP.
Hey folks, you're invited to tune in to Grenada Music to the World program, hosted by Eugene Gittens on Saturday mornings from 10 a.m. to 12 noon on Classic Radio 105.5, 105.9, Hot FM 98.5, 98.7, GBN TV, and all their social media platforms. The only totally local music program in Grenada, representing all genres of music. So it's Green's Music to the World on Saturday mornings from 10 a.m. to 12 noon on GBN with the music icon himself, Mr. Eugene Gittens. See you then.
Welcome back, folks. Doc, quickly. Now, it is believed that not only people's behaviors, thoughts, emotions, and so are involved, but also individual, social, cultural, economic, political, and environmental factors, such as national policies, social protection, standards of living, working conditions, and of course, a number of other things can also play a role. Let's talk briefly about that. Who are at risk for mental disorders?
A person's social status can affect them. People who are poor, people have to worry a lot about when they will get their next meal. Individuals who live in very dangerous communities who have to worry and extremely anxious. People who don't have a whole lot of access to healthcare, people who don't have, who just socially are isolated or are placed in very dangerous situations. The people that are fairly wealthy are most likely people who are highly educated. They can provide a lot of good things for their children. They tend to have they can provide more protection, better nutrition, and those things go a long way. They go a long way, in building person's self-esteem. Now, on the other hand, an individual, a person who's been raised in a family where there's a lot of poverty, the parents are struggling, and they're screaming at the kids. They're frustrated. If parents are frustrated, that frustration is going to filter into the children. And so, low-income people just again, I always tell people, you are what you eat. The field of psychiatry is beginning to move towards the effect of nutrition on the mind. Remember what I was saying earlier on? You can actually, if you're eating a lot of processed food and you're drinking a lot of sodas and you don't go to doctors and get your blood sugar under control and get your blood pressure under control, these are things that will predispose you later on in life to some amount of damage to your brain. Whether you just can't seem to find happiness because you have done a lot of damage to the brain because your sugar has been consistently high. You have clogged up the arteries. But so these are things that we see. So it's good to people have to take time out to distress. You cannot be living under constant stressful situation. And anybody who has been poor knows it's very difficult. But then a lot of people are also very resilient. A lot of people are resilient. I think that one of the best things, to really clean up mental health, it has to start from how we raise our children.
Okay.
And I said that earlier. You want to protect the children so that they're not broken, because when they're broken, now it's harder to fix. The best thing is don't let your child be broken. This is why I always say, know where your children's going. Know who your children's house is going. What kind of, don't let your daughter go and sleep in somebody's house. You don't know if I would say, if a person's an alcoholic and gets drunk all the time, why would you let your daughter go visit the daughter of that person? Right? Because what happens is, an alcoholic, what do? They get out of control and they mess with little girls. I'm talking about, this is what I see in the office. Okay? So what I'm saying is, having a child is not just, I have a child, I'm happy. Your primary responsibility is to protect that child. Don't trust people. And I hate to say that, but I have to, the statistics tells me when 85% of my clients have been abused in one form or the other, I have to say that. Only allow people who you truly trust, God-fearing people, to watch over your little ones, because you don't know what they're doing. You just can't say, go and stay with so and so. Go and stay with. You're making a big mistake. In this world today, there's a lot of people who are not God-fearing, and when a person is not God-fearing, your child is just, don't give people easy access to your child. Take and encourage your children to speak to you. If they're being bullied in school, bullying in school can have a tremendous amount of effect on a child's self-esteem and determine what kind of person that child's going to be. Sometimes the child doesn't even want to go to school. If your child doesn't want to go to school, you should go and find out. But you have to have a relationship with your child, right?
Definitely.
Okay. So whether it's your daughter even if your daughter doesn't feel comfortable talking to you, most daughters feel comfortable talking to their mother. Or the boy may not feel comfortable talking to their mother, but feel more comfortable talking to their father. But there's always somebody else. But what I'm saying is, there should be an open within the household, people need to allow their children to freely express themselves without fear. That the parents are going to punish them for telling the truth. And when you do that, you're really raising some very, very free-thinking, good kids. They will be bold. They say, if you touch me, I want to tell my father. If you touch me, I want to, you want kids to be able to. And when you get home, Dad, so-and-so touched me inappropriately. Mom, that's what you want. Because you need to, it is your responsibility to make sure that nobody violates your children physically or emotionally.
Okay, so Doc, let's go to the telephone. We have a caller on the line. Doctor in call, good evening.
Yes, good evening, Doc.
Yes, good evening. Go ahead, please, caller.
I am enjoying your program. Very educational. A while ago, you had mentioned of people who laughing and giggling inappropriately. I don't know. I do have a problem with that because I have one or two friends who, when I try to discuss my seriousness, they laugh and giggle inappropriately. Could you comment a little bit on that for me, please, Doc?
Okay, thank you, caller. Thank you very much. Doc, you had the question?
No, it was muffled.
He was saying that he has an issue with some of his friends. Whenever he tries to speak with them on a serious level, they're always giggling and laughing inappropriately.
Okay. So, unfortunately, again, mental health issues are not readily accepted. The older generation especially, they just think it's funny. They think it's a weakness. It's like, suck it up. They want you to just suck it up. So you cannot, it's hard to make them understand. That's why people should go to a professional counselor. Because you can't make your friend, they have no interest. To them, they don't want to hear your burden. So you can't. Now, if you may be, sometimes you may be lucky enough to have a friend who is calm, who is very, who really cares about you, deeply cares about you, and is concerned about you, and may listen to you. But it's not very common. If they're not trained psychiatrists or psychologists or and they don't have to be psychiatrists or psychologists, but they just have to have that insight enough to understand that people sometimes need to be listened to. And so, but your friends aren't, your friends, if they're not trained for that, what you're describing is very common. A lot of friends don't know how to handle somebody else's feeling. They don't know what to tell you. They don't know what to do.
But does that constitute a mental disorder?
You mean on the path of the friend, or
So you probably trying to talk to someone maybe about a burden that you have. You need someone to speak with. You want to express yourself. You want to get it out to help yourself to feel better. And that individual is probably just laughing away and taking you for a joke and probably poking fun at you. Does that qualify that individual to be mentally disorderly?
No, not necessarily, because remember what we said. It has to affect that person's mood, thinking, or behavior. If you're just frustrated because your friends are not listening to you, the only other thing you can do is basically to find a professional person, because your friends, they really don't have to listen to you. They should, because they're your friends. But that doesn't mean that you have a mental disorder. It's a mental disorder if you're not telling me that, I'm really getting very sad, I'm not sleeping, I'm losing my appetite, I have no energy, I cannot focus, I have no interest in doing anything. I'm just feeling bad now. I feel like I want to hurt myself. I wish I would go to bed and not wake up. Now that's becoming a mental issue, because now you're really clinically depressed. Okay? So you can have issues that you're frustrated with, but that doesn't mean that you have a mental disorder. It just means that you have some stressful issues that you're dealing with, but it hasn't really affected you to the point where we can call it a mental disorder.
Okay. There are people, Doc, that we locally call them, they're very bossy. They want to be in charge of everything. It's either their way or no way. They try to impose their authority by use of intimidation. For example, you might be working at an establishment and your boss is always trying to use intimidation tactics and do all of the things to sort of get you to subdue you. Is that a sign of a mental disorder?
All right. That is actually more of a personality disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Personality disorder is your personality is the psychological equivalence of your physical attributes. So individuals have psychological attributes. Now, but it becomes a disorder when their personality causes discomfort in their interpersonal relationship. So if you have a problem with this boss, and 5, 6, 7 other people have a problem with that boss, and that boss has been married 2 or 3 times, that person has a personality disorder. That person cannot maintain a healthy interpersonal relationship. So that person may be, you can be MD PhD and have a personality disorder. Personality disorders, they cannot feel what you feel. Okay? And so they can be narcissistic. Okay? It's always about them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It's always, they can be, a lot of narcissists are bullies.
Mm-hmm.
Not me. They insist that you recognize that they are on top. And part of that is also deep down, they may have some low self-esteem that, they're really, and they decide, and some people, for example, I find that sometimes when somebody has been bullied, their best defense is to bully others when they get to that position. I'm going to bully you so that because it's like they've been programmed to be that way. So but again, these are things, when families and parents don't get involved with children, if I thought one of my kids was being inappropriately treated, the schools know I would be there. I want to talk to the principal. I want to talk to the teacher. You can't mess with my children. I'm not going to tolerate it. I take it upon myself. It's my responsibility as a father to protect my children from being bullied, from being bossed around, from being pushed. I will not tolerate it. I just can't.
Mm-hmm.
So people who cannot maintain. Now, if you're working with somebody and you're the only person who has a problem with that person, then you may need to really evaluate.
Mm-hmm.
What you're looking for is how many other people have a problem with this individual. I'll give you a very good sign. A person who, when you look at a person, they tell you, and when I was at Albert Einstein, my professor at Albert Einstein said, when you see a man who said he's been married and divorced 3 times, he has a personality disorder. You know why? If there's got to be something innately wrong with that person, if he cannot find 3 women to make him happy.
Mm-hmm.
You're married and divorced 3 times, you got a problem. And that problem really, in almost 100% of cases, is personality disorder. And if you examine that person closer, you'll find a lot of people have a problem with that person.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times people avoid that person, or they want to kiss up to that person because they don't want to experience the wrath of that person. Okay? But that person is dysfunctional. That's a character disorder. It's a disease. It's a form of mental disease, but it's less recognized because these are individuals that may be successful, like your boss, or like a head of a teacher, or could even be a president of a nation. It's a character disorder. They really bully. They have no empathy for everybody. They don't care about how you feel, as long as they get their way. So that's So.
Okay. So, Doc, we're practically out of time for this evening. I wish we can go on. We have some comments on Facebook. Someone is saying, I would like to have this doctor's number. Then someone says, this is so interesting. I previously worked as an educator in London with abused children. The doctor's description of the various types of abused children by adults or parents is so real. Many of the children in the education center of this particular children's home was dysfunctional and antisocial as a result of the abuse. The abuse done unto them ranged from sexual, physical, physical, and mental. And there's some more, but the list is quite long. So quite a number of comments. We can't go through all because we're out of time. And Doc, just before we go, I just want us to just briefly summarize our discussion. What is the mental disorder, and just a brief thing on the common types, and then we wrap for this evening.
Right. Mental disorder is characterized by dysfunction in the person's mood, how they feel, in their thought process, and in their behavior. It can be to various degrees, and there's not just 2 or 3. There are 100 different garden varieties of mental health. There are different types of depression. There are different types of anxiety. There are different types of psychosis. Schizophrenia is just one of them. We also have things like schizoaffective disorder. We also have, in the mix of all of this, substance abuse, which in America is very big, especially in California. So, you have a lot of people using cocaine, methamphetamine, opioids. All these drugs they're psychoactive drugs. They can affect your thought process. And some of these drugs, especially the meth, cocaine, and the hallucinogenic drugs such as PCP, angel dust, they can actually make you schizophrenic. They can make a person schizophrenic. And even weed. People think weed is a benign drug, but weed is not a benign drug. Weed actually can cause, in a lot of people, can cause a form of thought disorder, psychosis. It can cause paranoia. And it can also cause some physical changes, such as people who smoke weed over a long period of time tend to have less, their brain tends to be not as developed, and they tend to achieve less. It causes what you call amotivational syndrome. So we live in a complex world of not just mental illness, we also have to deal with the socioeconomic background, what sort of trauma trauma is a big part of mental health. Substance abuse is a big part of mental health, and neglect and all this. So mental health, and on top of all of that, we didn't even talk about medical conditions that can present like mental health, like thyroid disorder, or somebody who has say pancreatic cancer will typically present a lot of time as depression. And I picked up some of those while I'm in the office. So there are physical disorders. Even just simple anemia, you're tired, you're fatigued. That's not depression, it's anemia. And if that is corrected by your doctor, you feel better. It could be vitamin B12 deficiency, vitamin D deficiency, folic acid deficiency. These are all things that can present as psychiatric disorders. So this is why when somebody presents to us, we do a complete blood panel. And one of the things we first try to do is to correct any defect in their body. We may need to give them vitamin D, which if it's low can cause depression. We may need to give them vitamin B12 injections. We may need to give them folic acid. We may need to give them thyroid medication to correct their thyroid disorder. And so psychiatry is so wide. It's so wide, but it's an interesting field.
Yes, indeed. Doc, there's so much to talk about. I would like us at a future date to discuss substance abuse, because here in Grenada we do have a problem with alcohol consumption among young people. It is a problem and it's getting worse. So I would like us to address that at a future date. So we will be talking again. But I want to, I thank you so very much, for accepting the invitation on short notice, I might add, to be on the program with me. And a special thanks to your dear wife as well. I'm indebted to her. I know she was a big influence.
She told me, she said, she has asked me if I would do it. She said, Godfrey's a good friend. He's a good childhood friend. Please do it. I said, okay, if he's a good friend of yours, I will definitely do it.
Oh, definitely.
She knows I don't refuse her anything. Whatever she wants, I go along with it. We've been married for about 32 years now, 33 years, and she's the best.
Right, wonderful. And folks, for those of you who didn't know, I'm gonna go out here. Dr. Olusola is also the father of one of the great guys in the pentatonics. So, yes, indeed. So, Doc, thank you so very much. And I'm looking forward to having you on the program again. So, thanks, and do have a good night.
All right, God bless. Bye-bye.
All the best indeed, yes. Okay, folks, that's our program this evening. Chatting there with Dr. Wole Olusola, psychiatrist, and of course, so many other areas in the medical field. Quite an interesting discussion on mental disorders, and we will be having him again in the future to deal with areas like substance abuse and many more other conditions that affect us. So that's it for this evening. Don't forget you can join me tomorrow. We've got Release It, and we have quite a lot to talk about. Alan is going to be here. So continue to stay with K105 FM. We are indeed number one. Thank you, and do have a good night.
Drug abuse, cancer,
measles, diabetes, AIDS,